Welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we talk about former, current creators in the game, Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm Dave Walsh, your host, and today we have a very special episode. I will push off all the ways that you can hang out and talk to and stay in contact with Card Talk, so we can get right into it today. It's with summer upon us, and we just finished talking and reviewing about all the core set cards. I thought it was good to get back and talking to people in the community. We talked to Caleb and Jeremy, and over the years I've actually been able to reach out and talk to and create a relationship with a creator in the game, a very famous guy in the community. So I am
infamous
happy
is probably more like
infamous. You're more than famous. You're infamous. Anyways, I'm happy to have with us today Dr. Matthew Dempsey. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Dave. How are you?
I'm phenomenal. It's a good day. What
an intro, my goodness.
Yeah, well, I wish I scripted something. I would have come up with something a little bit. I don't know. I just feel like you had your hands in a lot of things, and I still feel like even though you're not, the community isn't Matthew forward anymore. But I still feel like you're there, and I wouldn't even say you're lurking because I see your name pop up on comments and places. So anyways, we'll get to that in a minute. But
sure.
That's why I was confused. Like, you're still in the community, so that makes you current, and but you were a content creator.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Anyways.
Before content creator was even a term, I think.
Yeah, probably. Back in the single-digit 2000s. No, maybe not that long ago, but
yeah.
Matthew, why don't you tell people like who you are and why it's important for you to be on the show?
Well, I don't know that it's important that I'm on the show, but why am I here? Well, firstly, thanks for having me back. I did a couple years ago, I think. 2022 maybe. But the game came out in April 2011. Why that's a fact I remember, I don't know. But it is.
And it came out on April 20th. So I don't know. Like, a lot of people have significance for April 20th, but
okay. Well, that I did not remember. So clearly you know a lot about me just from that. But yeah, and I got my first core set, and then very quickly second and third right after that. So I've been playing from the beginning. Listened to Cardboard the Rings because it was the only game in town, was really active in the FFG forums. My handle was Dane Ironfoot before there was a Dane Ironfoot card. And that, I don't know if it's a funny story, but one of my favorite computer games of all time is the original Baldur's Gate.
Okay.
And I always played a dwarf warrior in that game. And so I wanted a dwarven name from Lord of the Rings. So back whenever that came out in the late 90s, I would have just searched for dwarf name that wasn't Gimli, and Dane Ironfoot was born as my handle for most things way back then. So got really active in the forums, and then I was pretty active probably on the Cardboard the Rings Facebook group. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember the exact timeline or exactly how things played out, but Mitch, who became a host a hair later of Cardboard the Rings, he wasn't one of the initial, wanted to start this thing called the Progression Series. I'm going to say he should have trademarked and copyrighted that term because now everybody uses it, and I want residuals every time I see it, and I get pissed off about it.
Yeah.
To be honest, and I didn't come up with it; Mitch did. But still, I feel like I own some stuff. But Mitch wanted Cardboard the Rings at the time was a casual podcast regarding the game.
Right.
Some of the hosts had stopped playing, yet they continued on with the podcast. They were just a group of guys getting together, to have fun with each other, which I totally understand, and make jokes and sometimes talk about the game. So Mitch wanted to do something a little bit more serious. So he did a Learn to Play series, which so many people have seen and say taught them how to play this game. But then he brought me on, and we did both card reviews and playthroughs, which is why it was called the Progression Series. So we started with core set. We could only use core set cards. We pretended we had 3 core sets, and we would, go through all the releases in order, only playing with the cards available at the time of release. And so that was fun. And then sometime around then, that was a horrible sentence, but nonetheless, there was Dan from Hall of Beorn, otherwise just known as Beorn. There was Ian, and he was Tales from the Cards, Tales of the Cards, whatever it was called. He did a lot of buyer's guides that were super helpful, like what should a new player buy to get into the game.
Yep.
He would rank the scenarios and stuff. That was a great resource. And then there was Derek, who wasn't affiliated with the show, but he was super into the community, and he kind of thought of us as like the Avengers. Let's bring together 3 of the most some of the biggest aspects of the community outside of Cardboard of the Rings to start the Great Company podcast. And so our goal was to be a more strategic discussion than Cardboard of the Rings was, delving much more into strategy of deck building and cards and tackling scenarios. And I think, sadly, what we really got, maybe not sadly, but it wasn't the intent. What we got really famous for was our book club series.
Yeah. Yep.
Where we were reading The Lord of the Rings together and then talking about the cards that were relevant to whatever chapters we were discussing that particular episode. And then we closed shop on that podcast a few years ago because life, we had done it a couple years, and
it's
life
so
takes
hard with 4 people trying to coordinate. And I think at one point, I was not involved at all, but like I remember just becoming super active in the community when you guys were winding down. So like,
okay.
And so I remember, at one point all 4 of you were in like 4 different time zones because Ian's West Coast and you were.
Arizona was weird because we don't do daylight. I'm not in Arizona anymore, but Arizona doesn't do daylight saving. So half the year I'm Mountain, half the year I'm Pacific. Yeah,
and then Dan is in Central because he's Texas, and Derek Atlanta, right? Atlanta. So so just even the logistics of coordinating.
Sure.
Forget that life gets in the way. People. Married, children, traveling, friends, all that stuff. So,
yeah. Scheduling podcast time was definitely difficult.
Yeah. But
so that was sort of how. Those were my 2 big quote unquote claims to fame in the community: doing the Progression series with Mitch, and then being a co-host on the Great Company podcast.
Yeah, and you have. Other than maybe Electron John, I think you have one of the most recognizable voices in the game here.
I probably told this story last time, but I will never forget. This was when I was still in Arizona. We had a fairly regular. It wasn't always weekly, but fairly regular Lord of the Rings meetup at the local game shop. And I'm playing one day, and a random guy in the shop walks by. And then he kind of like turns and looks and then keeps going because the bathroom was back the way he was walking.
Sure.
And then he comes back out of the restroom and he's like, "Hey, I recognize your voice." And I'm like, he's like, "Are you Matthew from the Great Company podcast?" Or maybe Progression series. I forget which one he maybe knew it from now. And I was like, and of course he could see me playing Lord of the Rings at the shop.
Right.
And I'm like, yes. And we became good friends and played the game a lot. And back when I was a playtester, he would play test the quests with me. Not that he should have, because he didn't sign an NDA, but I wasn't going to do it by myself. Sorry, Caleb. But anyway,
now it can be told.
And so yeah, I got recognized that way, which was probably my 1 minute of fame. But it was both flattering and kind of odd at the same time.
Yeah, well, and look at the relationship it formed, right? Like, yeah. Let me go back even further because I don't know if you had the opportunity to say this, but or talk about this. What's your history with Lord of the Rings, or what or what's your history with gaming? Like,
Sure.
like,
Gaming is a
that?
shorter story.
Yeah.
I'll start there.
Yeah.
So I'm Star Trek is my first love. I'm a typical nerd in that I like everything. I like Star Wars. I like the Game of Thrones universe, TV shows and stuff. The books are a slog. I don't. But Marvel's fine. I'm not a huge comic book guy in general, but I play Marvel LCG, whatever. So, but gaming in the 90s, again, going back to the Star Trek thing, Decipher printed in the early to mid 90s their Star Trek CCG. And I was just getting the Star Trek at the time. I loved board games like Clue or Candyland as a kid. Clue is still one of my favorite games. But other than those types of games, no gaming in my house. And so I don't even know how I discovered Star Trek CCG. That's a memory I don't exactly have, but ended up buying some, tried to play with my sister. I'm sure we played it completely wrong. Because, rule books back then were this fat and printed, tiny because they were stuck in the starter deck box. And then
when you're young, you don't even want to follow you just want to play, right? It's like, oh, we'll figure it out. Sure. Just throwing cards down.
Sure. And then Star Wars CCG came out, and my sister was a Star Wars person, and so we got some of that. And we tried to play, but I'm sure we didn't play right at all. Right. And that was it. And so then I was not a gamer. I think in college I played one game of Axis and Allies and frickin' loved it.
Okay.
I don't even know how or who I can't remember who. I have a vague visualization of one of the guys that I think I tangentially knew that got me to do it, but just played the one time, never did anything else.
Right.
And then somehow I discovered Lord of the Rings LCG. I have no idea how I discovered Lord of the Rings. I cannot remember, but I did, and that was my re-entry into real gaming, and now my closets are full of games.
What about the Lord of the Rings? Is that an IP that you particularly love? I mean, I know from listening to all the Great Company podcasts at least twice, that you're a huge Star Trek fan, some sort of Will Wheaton thing going on, but we'll save that for different time. But, what's Lord of the Rings mean to you? Not the game, but the IP.
Yeah. So, again, I have the worst memory of my own life. I find it quite odd and somewhat disturbing, to be honest. I can tell you every episode of Star Trek and the plot and the details and stuff, but I can't tell you anything about my life. So my vague recollection, I think, I don't remember the exact order, but I have two things sort of in mind. One is I remember in school watching the Rankin Bass cartoon of The Hobbit and loved it.
Okay.
But I also remember back, I don't know if they still do this in elementary school or junior high school, but I remember we would get those little flyers of books you could order through your teacher, and then you get the books months later, it felt like. Right. So I feel like the cartoon must have happened first, because why would I randomly pick the Lord of the Rings box set, Hobbit plus the 3 books in paperback? It's possible it happened the other way around, but I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure the cartoon was first, although to me, I feel like that was junior high school that we watched the cartoon, whereas the books I feel like I got in elementary school, but probably not. But I was old enough to read them at the time I got them, and so probably junior high. So the cartoon, and then getting it through the school book order club, or I don't remember what they were called, and so that's how I read it. But then you couldn't find the 80s Return of the King movie. I didn't see that till years later. The Hobbit was pretty easy to find, I think, but the Return of the King I saw as an adult. And of course, Peter Jackson's movies were still so far away.
Right. So
really, it was just the cartoon, which I still love to this day, and reading the books back in junior high. But that was my only engagement. I didn't do. I never saw the 70s version. Is it Bakshi? Is that his name?
Yep.
Until an adulthood. So it was just, I read it in junior high and I liked it. And then, the movies come out in the early 2000s. So of course went and saw them and loved them. But that was it. Didn't engage much further. And then the game comes out 10 years later in 2011.
Okay. So, I mean, are you a reader? Do you know what I mean? Do you have a book on your nightstand that you read every night and switch out?
I have. My problem is, much like video games, I have 10 books going at once, so I never finish anything, and then I buy 10 a week.
Right. Okay.
So as a kid, I kind of miss being a kid because for many reasons, no bills being
Right.
the biggest one. But as a kid, I moved every year or two as a child. No, my dad was not in the military. But just his job moved us a lot. And so I never had friends because I was always the new kid in school. And my parents would never buy me a Nintendo or anything. I had a Game Boy, but no Nintendo, no consoles. So I really just read.
Yeah.
And I would read adult books in a day. I kid you not. So I that was how I handled having no friends. And so avid reader for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're a little younger than me, but like you and I got into this because of not the Peter Jackson films, probably. Right, we were already fans of Lord of the Rings before,
right.
And then the Peter Jackson films kind of,
Yeah.
I always said, and this is my take, I'm not trying to put it on you, but I always said that the Peter Jackson films look like what I envisioned it in my mind for the most part. I mean, I know that they rewrote a couple of things and made stuff a little more cinematic, but that's the way I always kind of envisioned it, and that's why I love the Peter Jackson films.
Yeah.
So that's good. And so you get in the game, you do the podcast, you do the progression series, maybe in that order, maybe not. Well, who knows? Yeah. But and then life catches up with you. There's been some claim. Actually, the two real reasons why I wanted to have you on is three. I mean, you and I are it's always good to catch up with old friends and stuff.
Yeah.
But secondly, Con of the Rings last year, we talked. That's always something, and and then recently somebody came on the forums and and asked about Mitch and the progression series, and and obviously you had there, and so what is your current state of Lord of the Rings, the living card game participation?
So I, believe it or not, have not played every single quest. I was really involved with the game when we were doing the progression series, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the podcast, I was still playing the game. I think we would do some episodes as the Great Company from time to time and put them on YouTube, if I remember correctly. We didn't do that a ton. We did it sometimes. But towards the end of the game, I was still buying it, but the weekly group had sort of dissipated. Just life gets in the way, and people would show up for the organized play, special quests, and promo cards, but then it was hard to get anyone to come out other than for those events. Still playing, still buying, but not playing nearly as often. So, to be honest, I don't remember if I even finished the Isengard cycle. I probably did. And I played a little bit of everything, the later cycles, but finishing a cycle, no, never finished the actual book sagas. Never finished that. So currently, I am, thanks to Dragon Cards, playing through the saga quests with a friend. We finished the first book, so I'm going to just call it books because it was 2 boxes, now it's 1 box with the packaging, whatever. So we finished the first book. We did do the Gen Con quests, so the 4 stuff, and our next quest to play is the first of 2 Towers.
Okay.
So they are harder than I remember. They're still hard with a full card pool because we're not doing progression style here. Right. I was like, how did we ever beat this stuff back then? This is hard now.
Right.
We are trying to play semi-thematic. So all the heroes are a main person who should have been there at that time in the story. Mm-hmm. We did have Gandalf sacrifice himself, so that was cool. So doing that. But other than that, I said this on the Great Company all the time, that when I first got the game, I was solo.
Right.
Like probably most of us.
Right. And actually, I was going to ask you exactly this is my follow-up question.
And so I was buying my stuff either on Amazon or Miniature Market. This is through Dwarrowdelf. Mm-hmm. But somehow, again, I don't remember because I was not a gamer. I kind of dabbled incorrectly with Star Trek and Star Wars in the early 90s or mid 90s. And then somehow I discovered Lord of the Rings LCG. No idea how, because I'm not a gamer. I wouldn't have been searching for games, but somehow discovered it. And then somehow Oh, I'm sure it was the forums. There was probably a post about local meetups in a given area, and I'm like, oh, hey, there's people playing in Tempe. This is around Dwaro Duff time. I guess I'll go play. I'll go this Saturday. And so I showed up, played multiplayer, and I've never looked back. I was like, I will never play solo again. It is not fun. This game is a multiplayer game, and absolutely loved it. And got Matt H, who was on the Great Company a few times.
Yeah.
One of my best friends to this day. He was just in town a few weeks ago.
Good.
So anyway, so I never play solo. Have no desire. But so outside of the Dragon Cards thing with my buddy Ryan, the only time I play is Con of the Rings.
Oh, okay. And I mean, you've been to Con of the Rings the past 2 or 3 times?
I think I've been 3 times total, but not consecutively.
Okay. And, Con of the Rings...
I will be going this year, but you're not, so do.
I know. My kid has a birthday. I know.
Can it be moved?
I know. Every 4 years, my kid has a birthday weekend. That's the thing.
It's like leap year or some bullshit.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. But what brings you to Con of the Rings? Is it nostalgia? What's the draw?
Honestly, it's not about the game anymore for me. It's I get to see Dan, I get to see who always goes, maybe see Derek who goes sometimes but not always. And just Caleb always has a gathering at his house, which is so fun. Getting to see MJ Newman is always a treat. And just the people that I've known for a long time, and even though we're acquaintances, I'll text Caleb occasionally. I just played the Star Wars deck builder he designed.
Yeah,
I know it came out a while ago, but I played it for the first time when Matt, who I met through Lord of the Rings, was in town recently, and so I was like, hey, I just lost as the Empire, but barely, and it was a super fun game.
Yeah.
And so I'll message Caleb on occasion. He did a stream recently with FFG playing one of the cycles,
right.
And so I watched because I was free, and I sent a message after that. But it's not like I'm texting Caleb or MJ or the other folks daily or weekly.
Right.
But we acquaintance,
stay in touch.
Yeah, right. And so it's getting to see all of those folks that is the main driver. Plus, leaving the Arizona or the Nevada heat is always nice. But also because we can be hot through October, November.
Yeah.
And this is always October-ish. But what I will say is I always think I'm just going for friends, which is mostly true. But then I play a game and I'm like, oh, I forgot how fun this game is. That happens every year.
Right.
Oh, this game is actually pretty fun.
Yeah, it is. It is fun. And, it's always interesting because, of course, the game is filled with people who, visit it and then leave after a little bit. And it's definitely not for anybody. But I feel like the people that make this community great and what it is, friendly, welcoming, full of personality, even, that's they've just been in it for since they got it, I've been in it now 10 years, and there's no sign of me slowing up anytime soon. I was actually thinking about it. The podcast is 7 years old this year, and so I started it when I was 40, and I'm 47, and this has been a significant chunk of my adult life. There's something about this. It's the community, but it's also the game, because you can't build a good community around a crappy game, and you can't build a good game around a crappy. I mean, you can build a good game around a crappy community, but the staying power becomes less. It's just such a strange.
Yeah. I play a lot of games now. Currently, I guess I'm an FFG fanboy because I buy everything, almost everything they produce. But I'm pretty big into Star Wars Unlimited at the moment.
Okay.
And I go to a weekly meetup. I've done tournaments. And so I'm not involved in any content creation, or I don't really chat with the community in that game. But I've got to say that community for a competitive game is still better than Magic's community, which is just often a cesspool of toxicity.
Right.
It is. And given how toxic the Star Wars fandom is in general right now, I don't find the Star Wars Unlimited community, at least locally, to be that way. So I've made really great friends so far through that game locally, because no one's playing Lord of the Rings. So I forget what made me bring that up, but just, yes, the Lord of the Rings community has always been great. There was only one person at the beginning, Glaurung, whoever you are, you were an asshole, and none of us liked you. And so he was just complaining about every card, every quest. It's too easy. It's too easy. It's too easy. And the designers only listened to Glaurung, and then made the next cycle substantially harder, and then the rest of us all complained. But
isn't it funny how somebody can have 100 positive comments and they only listen to just the one negative one?
yeah, totally. So but outside of Glaurung, whoever that person was, I don't know that we ever discovered who that person. And if we did, I don't remember, nor do I care. I believe they were from Europe, but that's all I remember.
It was probably Caleb.
Before he was
yeah.
But anyway, outside of that person always complaining about the game, I remember the forums just being great and wonderful and people trying to help. And maybe that's just rose-colored tinted glasses nostalgia. The forums were not great, but my recollection is the community's always been awesome. I don't think I've ever had a negative experience playing this game. Some of that's the co-op nature for sure.
Right.
In fact, maybe 90% of it is. But I also think, because there is toxicity in the Lord of the Rings fandom. We saw it when Rings of Power came out.
Right.
A lot of those sort of comments that I would not be comfortable with if they were said at a gaming table or anywhere, And so it's not like Lord of the Rings is immune to that type of person. And to some degree, some of those comments, or when Magic did their set, and, Magic decided to make Aragorn African. Well, I was going to say African American, but there would have been no American Middle Earth, whatever Aragorn was.
Right.
And
darker skin.
The way some of those comments were phrased was frankly disgusting and hideous.
Yeah.
You can disagree with that artistic choice without being a racist asshole.
Right.
And so certainly the Lord of the Rings community has that type of toxicity, but in the gaming space, I have never, that I can remember, and I mentioned my memory of my own life is bad, but I don't have any recollection of a negative gaming experience ever. Mostly because you can blame the encounter deck and not the person you're playing with, I think.
Yeah. It's always Caleb that's a jerk.
That's right.
And never.
Damn Surge.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I mean,
that was a very long-winded answer to what brings me back. It's mostly community because I've really come to treasure these folks, but when I'm leaving, it's 99% seeing Dan and Derek and everybody else, 1% the game.
Yeah.
Also, the Game Center sells a delicious coffee beer that I absolutely love. I forget the name of it, but there's only one. So if you're at Con of the Rings this year, buy me 10, please.
Right.
But anyway, so it's 98% Dan, Derek. Well, no, 90%. 9% that beer, and then 1% the game. And then I get there, and it's Dan, Derek are 2%. The beer is 98%. The game still won, but I'm enjoying that 1% more than I thought.
It's just a really good 1%. What do you think of Rings of Power? We haven't talked since Rings of Power came out.
I have only... I think I've started the show 2 or 3 times. There's aspects I like of the first episode. I can make it through that one. I've not made it past episode 2. I think it's episode 2, where Galadriel's drowning in the water, and I just can't get past it. I'm like, this is so boring. So I have not, but now that season 2 is coming out, they've had a bit of time. I'm hoping the writers have learned. A lot of shows need 2 seasons, or more than one to get their footing. Right. Star Trek, for heaven's sake. Next Generation, anyway. If that was made today, they would never have made it past the first season.
Right.
But it became a great show. So, I give writers so I am the worst person, I think, according to my friends, to ask opinions on media. Because as a professor, my day job is thinking and communicating.
Right.
And so when I sit down to play a game, or more importantly, watch TV or movies, I want to turn my brain off. I don't want to think. I don't watch media to look for plot holes. I don't watch media to look for lore or canon inconsistencies. I don't care about that stuff. Right. I just want to be can I be entertained?
Right.
And
are you not entertained? Right. Okay.
And so, I have no problem with, I don't love all of the Disney Star Wars stuff, but I can turn my brain off and be entertained by all of it.
Right.
Doesn't mean I love it all. Doesn't mean it's great, but I can be entertained. Rings of Power is like the first thing that I'm having a hard time trucking through, and I have a low bar for cinema, which is just like, I don't care about. I've never read the Silmarillion. I've never read the appendices. They're boring. I don't care to read them. Sorry for the fans who like it. Tolkien's a horrible writer. Great story, great inventor, horrible writer. I can't read it. I've got other things to do, and so I don't know the backstory. So I don't care. I don't care if everything things contradicted because I don't know it to begin with. It's boring. At least episode 2. I just can't get through it. So I'm going to try, but before season 2 drops, whenever that is, but it's been a slog.
29th.
Okay, I got a little bit of time.
Yeah, you have 2 months.
Hopefully I can make it through episode 2.
Yeah.
I mean, what I can say so far is I don't remember the character names already. I think it's Elrond and the dwarf. They're cool.
Yeah.
I like their relationship with whatever I've seen thus far. The guy who sort of fell from the sky, potentially interesting mystery.
The stranger.
The little the little hobbits? I don't like them.
Harfoots. Yeah.
Don't like them. Yeah. They're annoying. I really like the little town though, where the things underneath the basement or the floorboards or like that kind of. Yep. That's kind of cool and interesting.
Yeah.
But so like there's interesting bits, but as a whole, it's not been engaging enough for me to want to pick it back up and try to slog through.
Right. Much like how Tolkien can describe a tree over 10 pages, this kind of it's a little slow.
Yeah. Right.
The end of season 1 is I appreciated the end of season 1.
Okay, I'll try to get there.
Yeah. There was it was good, and I am also like you. I want to be entertained. I'm not looking for plot holes, nor do I know it well enough to know the plot holes. Right, like. So if I'm entertained. The other question I have is, I mean, it's not a secret that you live in Las Vegas, I don't think, but if it is, guess what? Everybody knows now. Is there a vibrant gaming community that's not, gambling? And I know, and of course, I know that Las Vegas, there's 2, sides to Las Vegas, right? But is there a vibrant gaming community there?
I mean, like I said, I'm playing Star Wars Unlimited currently, and there's definitely a decent community for that game. Magic, of course, is always the biggest thing. Right. It seems like there's a lot of wargaming that happens here. I see a lot of Star Wars Legion stuff, Warhammer posts. I don't play Warhammer or any of that kind of stuff, but I see posts. I think there's 4 or 5 game shops that I'm aware of that seem to have fairly regular game days. So, Las Vegas, I don't know the population on the top of my head, 2 million-ish for the metro area. It could be higher than that. We're a fairly large city. So in any large city, there's going to be some kind of gaming community. I think Lorcana happens here. It's decent. I don't know about Fab. I'm not sure if there's a big Fab community here, but I don't play that game, so flesh and blood. So I don't know. I don't pay a ton of attention. But yeah, I should probably poke around and see if there's anyone that plays Lord of the Rings here in town, because I'd meet up on occasion to play that game. So for Star Wars, there's definitely quite a few shops that host Star Wars weekly, if not multiple times a week. So at least for the game that I'm currently playing with real people, face to face, not real people online, there's a healthy community there.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah,
I'm East Coast, New Jersey. And so I don't get and I know that, different parts of the country have different feels and different things. Yeah. And, there's a pretty active gaming community in New Jersey and, Eastern Pennsylvania and New York City, you could get together, but, Do
you play Lord of the Rings with anyone in person locally?
Just friends. I never go to a game store and play. I do go to game stores, but I never go to a game store and play. I'll call up my buddy lives down the street and say, hey, come on over, we'll play, so. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the cards and the card pool?
Sure.
It is called Card Talk. It's not called Matthew Talk. But
well, you should rebrand the whole show.
Yeah. Hey, we're always looking for other people to host if you wanna do something. Or write. We do have a blog too. If you wanna write something. Yeah.
I hear that people have blogs for this game, but I've seen no evidence. Inside joke for those who've been around a long.
Yeah. It's a. I am well aware that you are out of your, analyze every card, know what card is. So,
Sure.
very generally, how has the card pool kind of changed in your experience over the life of the game?
Yeah, you know what's so funny is I was just thinking of an answer to that question before you asked it, and I don't know why I thought that's where you were going to go.
Yeah.
So I remember at the beginning of the game that traits were not a thing. It was spheres. It was, I almost said aggression because that's what it is in Star Wars Unlimited. Tactics, lore, spirit, and leadership, and it was not about traits. It was about the colors. So to speak. And, people were clamoring for traits from the beginning. And the designers were fairly resistant to that. At least they said they were at first. It was more about sphere identity, not trait identity. But then we get Dane at the end of cycle 1. And then it's, Dwarf City in the second cycle. But it was still pretty much just dwarves. We didn't have elves yet. We didn't have outlands yet, as much as they're a trait. No eagles, really, though we got eagle cards, but not as a cohesive deck. And early on, I remember being very sort of anti-trait. I'm not sure why, because I'm a total trait player now, but back then, I really wanted the spheres to have separate identities and not to bleed. A color bleed is what Magic would call it.
Right.
Where every color can do everything. And I remember being very adamant that I didn't want that to be the case. I do remember starting to think that the sphere identities bled quite a bit towards the end of the game. And I thought that was disappointing. Spheres, should, with the exception of maybe leadership, should not be able to do all things equally well. And, traits, of course, became predominant because that's what the player base wanted. They wanted an elf deck. They wanted, I don't know, anyone wanted a Dale deck, but now you can build a Dale deck. They wanted...
they have a Bjorn deck now, right? Like, you can build Bjorn decks.
They wanted that. You can build a trait deck, and now spheres become almost irrelevant, which to me is sad. It becomes about the trait of your heroes and the interacting cards. So to me, and I don't want to be too critical, and I could totally be wrong because I haven't analyzed the later cycles that much, but it does feel to me like spheres became subsidiary to traits.
Yeah, I mean, even in the repackaged content, they have the starter decks. I'm not sure how aware you are of what they have those 4 starter decks, and they were packaged by trait, right? There's the dwarves, there's Rohan, Gondor, and the elves. So it's
I mean, we all built a dwarf deck back in the day when that cycle was fresh. But I think what really got me ultimately on the trait train was Rohan when we got into the Saga boxes and then the Isengard cycle. And then at that point, it was like, okay, well, this is clearly where the game is going. Hobbit Saga obviously made wars even more of a thing. And so I kind of just let go of that criticism. But I like the idea of colors and Magic or Star Wars Unlimited or spheres in this game, or just color identities in any game. And I feel like every game does it where there's color bleed, but I just wish there was a way where it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point? Just make all cards neutral if the colors aren't going to have identities.
Right. I think that over the life of the game, there was sphere bleed, and I think even back in the day, Sean from Cardboard of the Rings, I think he was Australian. He would talk about how things would bleed into one another, but I felt like Tactics of all things, kind of stayed true to its roots.
Yeah, I think that's true. Tactics is my favorite sphere, always was. I'm that type of gamer in general. Red's my favorite in Magic. Red's my favorite in Star Wars Unlimited, although I don't play it that often in that game. But I just kind of like those aggressive burn sort of decks. But yeah, you're right. Tactics did get some stuff to help with questing later on, but not like the other spheres got in doing the things they weren't supposed to be good at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're right. It stayed the truest. And so, unfortunately, perhaps the weakest in some ways because of that.
When you're playing solo, let me rephrase. When I'm playing solo, it's hard for me to play just a mono tactics
Sure.
deck and
Sure.
do anything with it. There's only like one card that lowers threat. There's only like two cards that draw you cards. So
Right.
you
Right.
know, yeah. I mean, I totally get that. Was there a card that you were? And in full disclosure, if anybody doesn't know, last time Matthew was on the show, we came out and talked about Gwaihir Hero, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what story anybody tells, that's the only reason why Gwaihir Hero exists is because Matthew willed it into existence.
That's right.
But was there anything early on or later on that you remember? And I'm asking the guy again that doesn't remember his own life very well. But is there anything that you were like, oh, this is awesome, or thematic, or I love this idea, or was there something that really got you more than anything else?
That is such a good question. I'd have to listen to myself on the Progression series or the Great Company podcast to know. But before that, Guahir, yes, I did. That is a card I definitely wanted for a while once I got on the trait train. And Eagle should have taken the Ring to Mordor. But nonetheless.
But Sauron would have figured it out, and by that point, the 9 were mounted.
They could have done it, and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my head. And I don't know if it's funny, but what's funny is I remember quests at this point almost more than I remember player cards.
Okay.
In terms of evoking emotions, or this was cool, or this was epic, rather than, oh, I really hope we get this thing.
Right. Okay, so broaden it out. How about like anything that was like, oh, this was phenomenal. Like, and I mean, I am making the assumption that you're more of an expert on the earlier cycles. If
that's true,
that's where I'm coming from. Like, was it really awesome that you were playing Watcher in the Water, at the beginning, and you were like, oh, this really feels like, standing outside the doors of Durin, or encounter at Amon-Din, saving all those.
This is probably stereotypical, the right word, the unsurprising answer that Foundations of Stone, I think, blew all of our minds when that first came out, where you could split into 4 different quest areas, and it's luck of the draw if you got the one that your deck was good for, and you'd have to tread water and hope your friends could rescue you, because inevitably you got the one that was worst for you. That quest was just so earth-shattering. It changed the foundations of the game.
Do you ever think about how that came to be? Because you talked about how the designers were listening to Glaurung, or but like you're like oh, you're gonna play 4-player. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna lull you into a self.
And what's funny is I haven't played a lot of the more recent quests, but certainly of the first couple years of the game, I still think that's probably the best quest. For multiplayer anyway. And the funny thing is, it came so early in the game's life cycle that I don't know how far along they were in development versus listening to community feedback, if that makes sense. Meaning, was that one already in the can at the printer when the first cycle was being done? I don't know.
Right, and that's from the second cycle, which was developed by Lucas Litzinger, right? So that wasn't Caleb or MJ or
Caleb wasn't around yet. MJ wasn't around. MJ was doing fan content at the time. Yeah. So, but Lucas also wasn't the initial designer of the core plus first cycle.
Nate.
That's right.
Right.
And so I don't know how far along they were. I know when I became a play tester, they were pretty far ahead of wherever we were in the actual physical printed card.
What were you play testing? Do you remember?
Helm's Deep was one. Mm-hmm. So it was around that time.
Okay.
So
mid-saga.
There's a lot of ghost stuff. So whatever had the spirit ghost, whatever cycle or quest those were horrible. They become your cards become attached, or your cards become things. I feel like, isn't that what the ghosts do? The spirits do.
Maybe that's it's the heirs of not
No,
Heirs of
it's
Numenor,
after that.
Isengard.
Were there ghosts in Isengard? I feel like
I
it's
mean,
even
Angmar
later.
Awakened is the one with all the undead, but they don't
Yeah.
do anything. Like they don't.
Oh,
They just come out. They just keep coming out. Like they spawn
your
more
your
ghosts.
cards don't become ghosts, or you don't attach. I don't remember.
Oh, I know what you're saying. There are some scenarios where like the top card of your deck can become undead.
I could be conflating things too,
No,
but
no,
I
no.
remember
I think that's
I remember doing Helm's Deep,
right. I think
and
that's right.
remember
Angmar Awakened. That's a
I think
particular
and I
mechanic.
remember doing that.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy playtesting. I did not do it very much.
Why not? What was?
Well, one is there was no art on the cards, and so it made it really difficult to play because you actually had to read the cards, heaven forbid, to know what was in. Like, because now once you played it, like you recognize the art. Oh, that's the location of this, or oh, this guy does that. But no, you actually had to look at all the times. But also, the player card pool would be so far advanced of what you had. I was like, I can't do both. I can't try to learn new player cards and new quests at the same time. So I would only play test the new quests with my current card pool, and we'd get stomped every time, and it just wasn't fun.
Right.
I'm sure if I had played tested with new player cards, it would have been different. But I just found it very difficult to manage. I love getting the spoilers. I love knowing what player cards were coming, but I didn't.
You played that really close to the vest because I don't read the credits much, so I didn't even really know that you were a playtester. So, now I want to go.
I think my name's in the book for probably for Two Towers, maybe Angmar Awakened. I'd have to look, but like we got some sort of credit for doing it. I never turned in. I think we got like FFG cash or something. I don't remember.
Right.
I never did anything for it because I remember the comments on the player cards were always like, "Make it more powerful, give it plus 10 attack," and I was like, "This is the dumbest playtester comment."
I know.
So I'm exaggerating just there.
Yeah, no, I get you though.
But so I just found it unenjoyable, other than getting the spoilers. And so I didn't play test for and I'd have to print it out. I had to put it in sleeves. Like I said, I was play testing with my buddy Josh.
Right. No, you weren't.
So, oh, that's right. I played tested solo by myself.
Right.
And so so we'd have to meet up. Luckily, he had a job where he could like meet in the middle of the day, and so that worked. So we often did it in the middle of the day, but where no one was around. Not that whatever, but we did meet up at the local game shop, but always like weird time, so people wouldn't see what we were doing. I did not find it super enjoyable.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Just the knowledge, though. Those people who love to know things. Like that's what it is. I know something that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask this. This has come into my mind. I don't know if you were as involved. I know, but at one point there was a poem that made it into the community that spoiled the whole last cycle. Like
a poem?
Yes. It talked about like how Gollum was going to be a hero and how like it just,
I have no memory of this.
So somebody had broken, a playtester obviously broke their NDA, right? They made a separate, different Reddit account. You may not even be on Reddit, and posted like, is that
what
like
an asshole?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Could you see that happen? Obviously, you're a man of integrity. You wouldn't do that sort of thing. But I
didn't ever publicly say what was coming. I think I told friends certain things.
Right.
Sorry, Caleb and everyone else. But, but I would tell my friends some of the player cards that were coming. Right. But I don't think it ever informed what I did on Progression Series because it wouldn't have been relevant there. Card reviews. I don't think I ever said anything during the Grey Company days, but I might have not been playtesting at that point. Again, the timeline is fuzzy for me. Because I was playtesting Helm's Deep and Angmar Awakened, I don't remember. That would have been at least a few months, if not a year or so, before it came out.
Sure.
So the timeline I don't quite recall, but. I think what an asshole. And FFG had some problem, or no, not FFG, X-Wing had moved over to a different company. They had folks spoiling stuff recently. Now, of course, the game just was recently announced to be canceled, but they had spoiler. It's always a thing. Magic's had leaks. I hate to even bring it up, but Dan had an issue with leaks and his supposed blog.
Oh, really?
because he was playtesting, I think, and programmed stuff into Hollow Bjorn so he could playtest. I don't know why he had it on his blog, but it accidentally got leaked, like an entire cycle of stuff. So, but that was unintentional and whatever. But you know, I mean, this was just like, I forget exactly how it worked, but like, again, this is the 2010s. It's not that long ago, but technology is so much better now.
Right.
But like, we were just like, it was like a Google Doc. I don't even think it was a Google Doc, but it was some kind of thing. We would go in and we could download the stuff.
Right.
And print it out and do whatever with it. So it wasn't like it was super secret, super locked. I'm sure if a company wanted to spend the money now, it would be like you log into their Dragon cards and you can only play with it there. I guess you could always do screenshots, but although there are web pages that block screenshotting. So, I mean, you could take a picture with your phone of your computer screen. You know, there's obviously ways around it, but there's things they could do. But that would be a company designing proprietary playtesting software, and they're not going to spend that money, I don't think.
Right. I mean, and after all, it is just a game, right? Like,
but people like to be. I mean, some people want to know everything right away, but you know, so like Star Wars, for example, like I've mentioned it a few times. Their second set comes out next week. I've seen the spoilers, official from FFG, but not paid much attention. I kind of want to be surprised opening packs.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun. And even though in an LCG you know everything in the pack, it's not random, it's still, well, we never knew the quest cards. That was never spoiled. But it's, I think, fun to be surprised. Like, oh, look at this new ally or attachment. Or back then I would want to know everything because I was on shows. But if I was just a fan of Lord of the Rings LCG and they're still making content, I wouldn't want to know everything that's coming out.
Yeah.
I think it takes some of the joy out of opening a pack.
Yeah, and playing it, right? Like, if you know,
some of the best. The other thing about playtesting, sorry to cut you off, is I did like knowing the stuff, but it also meant I knew at least a year, if not more, of content coming up. So nothing was ever a surprise. So it was fun to know, but you also lost something, at least for me, knowing everything.
Like that Christmas
and so
feel,
that was another reason I didn't love it, because I kind of liked the surprise.
Yeah. Did you have like your hand in any sort of major change that you know of that was like,
like I said, I never play tested the player cards, so I don't even know if I ever made a comment on them. I would look at them and we would make comments like either in a document or a forum. I can't remember, but I could see everyone's comments if I recall correctly. I never play tested those because it was just too much to juggle, so no comments there. I just remember saying Helm's Deep is way too hard. Angmar Awakened, way too hard. But the caveat was always, I'm not playing with new player cards.
Right.
The other issue I sort of vaguely remember is I didn't get to see the player cards that were play tested before I became a play tester, if that makes sense. So like, I know my cards, and I know the cards that come in the Helm's Deep box, but not the stuff that was in between.
Right. Right.
I don't think I had access to those, if I remember correctly. So even if I was play testing the new player cards, I wouldn't have known the ones that I didn't play test for. I don't know. Hopefully that's clear.
No, I got you. Because there was product in between what's currently released.
Even if I had added, that's right. Even if I had added in the Two Towers player cards, I don't know that it would have made my decks phenomenally better because I would have been missing a whole cycle or something.
Right.
Of cards. So I doubt that I had a huge impact on it, because the caveat was always, I'm not playing with the full card pool. But I never beat Helm's Deep when I play tested it. It was impossibly hard. And Angmar Awakened, I just remember hating those damn ghosts. That's my only recollection.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah,
that's about right. Is there some card that you maybe look back fondly of? You know, like, not that you were necessarily excited about, but like...
Here's top ahead, Brand.
Okay. Brand.
From that his name?
Yeah. Like from the beginning of the game.
Cycle?
Yeah. The guy that... now I have to look him up now too, right?
He's definitely a multiplayer. I mean, Hollow Bjorn, this blog I've never heard of, is going very slow.
That's just how many people are on it.
Why won't? Well, I've been getting a few notifications that my internet sucks.
So
I think I remember what he
Brand,
does.
Son
It's
of
when he
Pain.
participates in an attack and kills the thing, you can ready someone else's heroes. Is that right?
Yes, choose and ready one of that player. If because he's ranged, so when he ranges over
Right.
and
Right.
helps kill the thing or kills the thing all by himself, you
Yeah.
can ready that other person's.
That's right. So I was always, I've always loved the underdog my whole life in stories, or if I didn't love them, fascinated by them. So, for example, I'm a huge American Civil War buff, and while I'm totally pro-Union and I'm glad the Union won, the Confederacy is definitely the underdog, and I'm fascinated by the Confederacy in a lot of ways as sort of an academic exercise.
Sure.
So whenever the community shit on heroes, to be totally blunt, I wanted to make them work. So Brand, I actually thought back then I made a Brand deck that was pretty good, and people were like, "Oh, this isn't that bad." Now, was he the best hero? No, but you could make him work and do cool things.
Right.
I remember there was it was about defense, and it's a dwarf. Later on in the game's life, it was a tactics hero, and people hate, like, I think he exhausted him to add defense or something.
Yep. That's
So
Dory.
yeah, and so I tried to make him work. Not, I don't think I got him to work as successfully as Brand, but I always felt like I wanted to take the heroes that, not all of them. I'm not a Hobbit person, so I never played any of those Hobbits, and a lot of them are bad. But
Okay, this interview's over.
but there are some really bad ones. Like, isn't one of the Pippins is bad, right? The Spirit one.
Yeah, Spirit Pippin is horrible.
And there's another bad Hobbit hero too, but I can't remember which one it is. So anyway, but outside of the Hobbits, I was always trying to make the Papudon heroes work, and Brand was definitely one I brought a lot to our weekly plays.
Right.
And my deck was able to do stuff. And Brand I mean,
works.
you don't always need to ready someone's hero, but sometimes that extra attack helped them, or readying someone after they defended or whatever, help them kill the enemy that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, I mean, there's a whole ring around the Mary deck. So Tactics Mary, who is a a hero, right? It's a hobbit though, so
Yes. Well, he's a good one.
He readies.
Stan's good too.
He readies a hero that participate in an attack with you, so you can actually, use Brand and Mary to kill something and ready Brand and Mary, lather, rinse, repeat. For the whole. The whole thing, as long as you're engaged with the thing on the Mary side of it.
Yeah, so, like, is Brand the best hero in the game? No. Is his 2 willpower sort of wasted? Probably. But at the same time, like, if you know there's going to be a round where there's no enemies, and so his ability's worthless, I actually kind of don't mind that he's got 2 willpower.
Right.
Maybe he should have had 1 defense and give him an extra attack or an extra hit point or something. I don't know. Or an extra willpower. But nonetheless, I remember initially it was like, I want to try every hero. That went out the window pretty quickly because we started just getting so many.
Yeah.
And some that didn't appeal to me. Like, what's Ian? Ugh, Ian loves Grima. No, never tried that hero. Never going to try that hero. No. But anyway, for a while I tried to use every single one, and I did. And especially if the community was really down on the hero, generally speaking, I tried to make it work.
Right. And it's funny because that's something that I do. I feel like, there's opinions, and rightly so. People will say, like, because the Arid Mithrin, the latest cycle to be re-released is the Arid Mithrin, and there's these guarded cards in there where you have to, do the reveal, put a thing, and so the community in general is like, these things aren't worth it because you get an extra encounter card and stuff. But I really love it, so I will play. I have a whole, deck. I have decks designed around it. I'm like, see, they do work and they are powerful. That's good.
It's certainly a cool mechanic. But it is true, you do get an extra thing, but it's probably not worth it solo because it's already hard. True solo with just 3 heroes, it's hard enough to do all things at the same time. But in a 3 or 4 player game, 1 extra card, everything already has surge anyway. So whatever.
Well, going on this whole, like, things that you may, like, remember, so we talked about maybe cards that you liked, and like, was there a particular moment that was pivotal in your, like, maybe you were playing a game online with Mitch, maybe you were at a con that you were just like, this is the moment. Maybe you and I were hanging out and playing, at the con sometime. I don't know. Like, was there a pivotal moment in your, in your participation in this game that you were like, I will always remember that?
Well, the last time you and I played, I'd had a few beverages and pissed somebody off. So I won't forget that. But
I'm talking about like things that make you.
No, I know. I don't. I'm sure there were, and I don't recall any particular moments right now. But like, I'm sure there were so many nail biters where I was ready to throw in the towel, but we somehow eked out a victory.
Yeah.
Or just barely lost at the end. But I don't. I can't think of like an epic moment off the top of my head, but I'm sure that they have existed.
I'm sure that they have to.
Because this game really creates that kind of thing. But I mean, to be fair, there's also a lot of anticlimactic. At the end, you just kind of quest for 100 and you win. But I'm sure there have been moments. I just sadly none come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you're describing is kind of the beauty of the game. Is this game, and you've said it kind of piecewise through the whole discussion, is that like this game is a game in like real incremental, like you +1, you don't want to give somebody +10, and like when you quest for 85, that's a very rare occurrence. So this game sets up to have those epic moments where you can do it once, and if everybody could quest for 85 every game, it wouldn't that wouldn't be on the forums. Like it would, everybody would be like, well, whatever. I just did that.
And I'm sure there have been moments where we're like, we're gonna win this unless we flip this card, and then you flip that stupid card. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure those things have happened. Or the reverse. It's like, we're gonna win if we don't get this, and then we don't get it, we win. Or like, woo.
Right.
I remember. This might have been at the last con. It's not super duper epic, but I was playing with Caleb actually. And his buddy, I can picture him clearly. Jason, thank you. Yep. And someone else, and me. And we were playing the Clue quest. And again, Clue's one of my favorite board games as a child. Murder at the Prancing Pony.
Right.
And I think it's Jason who just does a wild freaking guess. And we're just like, okay. And he was right. And what he said was, it's always Johnny Goblin Fingers. And Caleb's like, okay. And he freaking flips it, and it's freaking Johnny Goblin Fingers.
Right.
And that was pretty fun. That's a good quest in general.
Yeah.
But that was a fun moment recently. And I think it happened again on the next one. He's like, let's just guess this one. And it was right. And we're like, what the hell is happening here?
So funny. But, yeah. I mean, the game sets itself up for those epic moments. So,
totally.
Yeah. Well, what do you have coming up in the future? We've talked a lot about what you've done, what you're doing now. Like, what's coming up with you in the future? At one point, you may have teased a reunion episode of Gray Company. I know that you are still in contact with those people, and I know you're going to the con. But is there anything?
I forget exactly what I was teasing. I think we were trying to get together to chat with Ian about his hand in developing the revised core set. He did the campaign part.
Yeah.
And he agreed to do it. And then, as in typical Grima fashion, he backed out. No, I think he did back out. It was more just, it's a great idea. We always want to do it. And life gets in the way, and, Derek's got 2 kids. Ian has at least one. There might be a second one now. Dan's always traveling and just super busy with work, and his wife's in nursing school. She might have just graduated recently. I can't recall. But either way, lives are busy. And so that ended up not happening. We should still do it. We've always talked about the Gray Company doing a Deep Space Nine podcast, because all 4 of us are huge Deep Space Nine fans from Star Trek.
Nobody's perfect.
No one's but
love you,
it is just difficult to coordinate. The funny thing is, I have more time than I've ever had in my life now.
Right.
With just how work has played out. But So yeah, I don't know if that episode will happen. It would be fun. Maybe I'll ping the guys and see if we can actually get it set up right after this call. But yeah, I'll be at Con of the Ring. So if any listeners are going to be there, definitely say hi. If you're listening and debating it, Con of the Rings is so fun. I don't know why I forget this, but every year I'm like, ugh, I got to go to frickin' Minneapolis, yeah, it's just like what? There's always a layover because there's no direct flights, and it's like this is annoying, and or at least on Southwest because I'm Team Southwest. But anyway, so I mean, it's like once you pick an airline and your points, you can't go anywhere else because you're losing points.
Right.
So I picked Southwest in my 20s, and I'm stuck with them. So anyway, it's always like, oh, I got to pack, I got to do that. But I get there. The game center is really not. Game center is really nice. The food is decent for a game store. The beer selection is good. That coffee beer.
I heard lately that they got rid of the counter.
Oh, they did.
It's
probably expensive to maintain and probably doesn't make enough. I don't know how busy that place is.
Yeah. And it's huge though. Like it's not your average game store. No.
I mean, I doubt. Are they selling? They're probably not. I would assume the kitchen's not even open during the week. Like that should only be open on the weekends.
Maybe they're not doing food anymore. Maybe they're still doing drinks.
Well, they better still have that beer. I'm not going.
Okay. Well, I'll do a little research. I'll get back.
We need some research here.
Yeah.
Or I'm packing a flask. But anyway, so
it can't be over 3.2 ounces.
Oh, well, not on the airplane. I'll bring a flask.
Okay, you'll pack it. Okay, good.
But anyway, it's always a better time than I expect. And I always think I'll play 1 or 2 games, I'll have my fill, and I just want to sit and chat. No, I end up playing a bunch into the wee hours of the night, pissing off other people with my drunkenness. And so no, it is. So if you're thinking about going and getting to Minneapolis is feasible for you, you should absolutely go. It's such a great time. And, we were talking about this pre-show, but the first couple Con of the Rings that I attended, like I said, I think it's been 3 non-consecutive.
Okay.
People knew who I was the first or second. But this last year, nobody did. I mean, the old timers did. But I played with a bunch of new people. They'd never heard of the Progression series. They'd never heard of the Great Company podcast. It was all Cardboard of the Rings, which is fine. This is not a criticism. Right. But to me, it's actually a good thing in a way that this game is still attracting new people. Right. People still want to buy it, right? I don't know if the repackaged cycles are selling all that well, but I would assume so, but I don't know.
The information that I have is that they're doing well, although, I don't have it from marketing. I have it from, the designers of the game are saying, it was a good decision to repackage.
Yeah, and well, of course, is relative. Relative to like it's only going to sell well for folks who either want to just buy it because they want the officially printed campaign card, even though they already have the quests, or literally brand new people. Right. And so for the game is 13 years old now?
Yeah.
And so for a 13-year-old game to still sell relatively well, whatever relatively well means for this game is cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wish that we had, unlimited time. I would love to have you on. Like, here's what I will say, because I know that sometimes the back end of these shows become challenging for people. But if you and Mitch want a platform, I'm saying this cold, like if you and Mitch want to get together and need a platform, I'd be happy to provide it. If you and the Gray Company want to get together, I will just quietly sit off to the side. I will not insert myself into the Gray Company, but I would be happy to do the back end stuff, whatever,
Yeah, okay.
I'd be happy to provide that platform.
It would be awesome to have a Great Company reunion in whatever fashion that happens. And certainly I'd love to chat. I mean, Mitch and I still talk on occasion, but it would be great for he and I to reminisce about the good old days, the good, the bad, the ugly, or whatever he chooses to discuss. But yeah, his involvement in this game, from the original Amazon reviews to which he would write tome. If folks aren't familiar, he would write like 5 100 million word Amazon reviews for each quest.
26. You could probably go back and see some of.
Oh, I'm sure there. If the page is up, I'm sure
reviews,
it's still there. But that's kind of what he became known for: is his extensive, well-detailed reviews, which got him on Cardboard the Rings, which started the whole thing. So it would be great to sort of reminisce with him about his time. So we'll see if I can make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be the brains. I can be the tech, but you're the brains of this whole thing.
Okay.
And the personality.
I mean, on all the shows that I've been on, I never did. I just come and get drunk and yammer away, or in this case, coffee. But someone else always did the editing work, thank God, because it's not what I want to do.
Right. Nobody. It's there's a limited. We're already in a niche community, and now you want to get even nichier with video editing skills. Video or audio editing. It's like, oh, nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Matthew, as always, it's always a pleasure to hang out with you for some time, and I'm glad you're here. And we didn't talk about too many cards, but just reminiscing about Lord of the Rings is always something fun to do.
Well, we said this pre-show, and the idea of reuniting the great company, reuniting Mitch and I, for an interview, to some degree, maybe this is cheesy and silly, stupid, but it's preserving some of the history of the game for those of us who were there, but it's also, or the content creation side of the game for those of us who were there, but also for those who weren't there. It's kind of a look back into the past of what the game was like when we were really into it, or just what was the community like. And I think it's valuable, even if all I did was talk about trying to make Branson and Bane work. So
yeah, and I have to say that just as we wrap up here, I probably should have led with this, but you and the early content creators, and you had your hands in a lot of it, and I feel like all the content creators were kind of together. There was never much competition, at least outwardly, with that. There was no appearance of conflicts of interests and things like that. It was just like everybody, and that's what I seek to provide is I'm going to talk about the best things in the community, and I'm going to work with Cardboard of the Rings. If that I'm not going to work against them, and all the stuff that people do.
Yeah, I know we're trying to wrap up here, but quickly, I think that one of the best things about the community for this game at that time was that we all tried to scratch a different itch. And that's not the case. Like, for example, Star Wars Unlimited, I feel like all the content channels are basically the same, and they're all saying pretty much the same thing. But in this game, Cardboard of the Rings was a more casual, laid-back, 3-hour discussion, mostly filled with jokes, a little bit about the game. At the beginning. What it's like now, it certainly morphed. We were trying to be a more strategy-oriented, deck-building, quest-solving podcast. Progression series was, let's just give people a visualization. This is a complex game. They want to learn how to beat it, and we'll do it in video form. While also doing card reviews. And so, Bjorn's blog was different than Ian's blog, which was different than, they all tried to do something different, which is why I think the content creator community back then, and probably to this day, there was never this sense of competition or disdain, at least not that I can recall, because we weren't stepping on each other's toes, because we were trying to do something different, complementary, if you will.
Yeah. And it's like, you bring somebody into your podcast, and then they go to find Cardboard of the Rings, or Cardboard of the Rings goes and finds Great Company, or you're doing the playthroughs on
like Cardboard of the Rings. I think I remember being on the show at least once. There was like an anniversary episode or something. I think I definitely did some of the post Gen Con episodes because I went there, but I feel like there was an anniversary episode that I was on. I can't even remember. I don't think I said very much, but they would bring together the various aspects of the community to celebrate a given event or whatever it is, and that was always
like a community hot jam or something. I don't know. They would go out in the community, and, just grab people and who were doing stuff in the game. But I mean, and so the point of what I was saying is that I'm thankful that the content creators, the people that were in the forefront, the tent poles of the community, were guiding my own creation. Because I'd never done it. And so for that, I
Yeah.
always have to thank the forefathers of the content creators. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't none of as far as I know, none of us had done it either. And so in the wilderness of the 2010s, it was certainly fun to figure it all out.
Right. So thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to be on.
Yeah. So, anyways, folks, join us again next week as we get back to our regularly scheduled card. I'm not sure what card we're doing next week, but it's probably not going to be Bran, son of Bane from the Hills of Emyn for sure. But
Best quest in the game.
yeah, yeah. Okay, everybody, have a great week. Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube. And there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.